A pregnant woman was trembling in court facing her racist boss, but when she stood to testify, everyone gasped at what started flowing down her legs. Angela Davis gripped the edge of her bathroom sink, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and sweat beaded on her forehead. At 8.5 months pregnant, even the simple act of standing made her back ache. The red numbers on her alarm clock read 6:45 a.m. She had exactly 2 hours before her court appearance. "Come on, Angela. Keep it together," she muttered, splashing cold water on her face. Her stomach churned with morning sickness, the kind that hadn't subsided even in her third trimester. The baby kicked hard. Angela pressed a hand against her swollen belly, taking slow breaths. "Not now, little one. Mama's got important business today." Her phone buzzed on the counter. Her lawyer, Sarah Chun. "Hello," Angela answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Angela, how are you feeling? Ready for today?" "As ready as I'll ever be." She moved to her bedroom, where her court outfit lay pressed on the bed, a navy blue maternity dress she'd bought specifically for this day. "Just dealing with the usual morning stuff. Remember, all you need to do is tell the truth. Mr. Roberts and the company's lawyers will try to rattle you, but stick to the facts." Angela's hand trembled as she reached for the dress. "What if they bring up my performance reviews? Those doctor reviews? That's exactly what we want them to do. We have proof they were altered after you filed the complaint." A sharp memory hit Angela. Sitting in Mr. Roberts' office 6 months ago, her hands folded over her then smaller belly, listening to him explain why she wasn't senior management material. "Your attitude doesn't fit our corporate culture," he'd said, not quite looking her in the eye. "And frankly, your appearance isn't what we're looking for in leadership." "My appearance?" she'd asked, knowing exactly what he meant. The same week, he'd promoted Jenny from accounting, a white woman with less experience but straight blonde hair and what Mr. Roberts called a more professional look. Sarah's voice brought her back to the present. "Angela, you still there?" "Yes, sorry." She pulled on her dress, adjusting it over her belly. "Just remembering things." "Good." Those memories are exactly what the judge needs to hear. Papers rustled on Sarah's end. "Have you reviewed the timeline we prepared?" Angela glanced at the thick folder on her dresser. "Every night for the past week." "Perfect. Now, eat something light, stay hydrated, and I'll meet you at the courthouse at 8:30. We'll review everything one last time before the hearing starts at 9. After hanging up, Angela forced down some toast and tea, though her stomach protested. The baby shifted again, more insistent this time. A cramp tightened across her abdomen, different from the usual Braxton Hicks contractions she'd been experiencing. "Not today," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "Just a few more weeks, remember?" That's what Dr. Thompson said. The drive to the courthouse took longer than expected. Morning traffic clogged the streets, and Angela's hands clenched the steering wheel at every red light. She caught glimpses of herself in the rearview mirror, her natural hair neat but untamed, exactly how Mr. Roberts had called unprofessional countless times. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone steps already crowded with people entering for the day's proceedings. Angela parked in the designated spot Sarah had arranged close to the entrance. Even so, climbing those steps felt like scaling a mountain. Halfway up, another cramp hit. Angela paused, gripping the railing. An elderly woman touched her arm. "You all right, dear? Should you be climbing these in your condition?" Angela managed a tight smile. "I'm fine, thank you. I have to be here." Inside the courthouse's marble lobby, the air conditioning hit her like a wave. Security guards waved her through the metal detector, one of them eyeing her pregnant belly with concern. "Ms. Davis?" Angela turned to see Sarah striding toward her, briefcase in hand. Her lawyer's crisp pantsuit and confident walk provided a strange comfort. "You made it." And with 15 minutes to spare, Sarah guided her toward a private conference room. "How are you feeling?" Angela started, then saw him, Mr. Roberts, walking past with his legal team. He wore his usual gray suit, his face set in that familiar, dismissive expression. Their eyes met for a brief moment. The baby kicked again, harder, and another cramp squeezed her midsection. Angela pressed a hand against the wall. Sarah grabbed her elbow. "Angela, I'm okay," she said automatically, but her body trembled. "Just nervous." In the conference room, Sarah spread out their documents. Remember, when you're on the stand, speak clearly and take your time. If you need a break, just let me know." Angela nodded, but her attention drifted to the window. In the reflection, she saw herself, a black woman 8.5 months pregnant, about to testify against one of Boston's biggest companies. Her mother's words from the night before echoed in her head. "Baby girl, you're not just fighting for yourself anymore." The door opened. A court officer appeared. "Ms. Davis? They're ready for you." Angela stood, gathering her strength. Another cramp rippled through her, stronger than before. She took a deep breath, straightened her dress, and picked up her water bottle. "Ready," she said, though her voice shook slightly. As they walked toward the courtroom, Angela felt the weight of what she was about to do. Years of discrimination, subtle jabs, and blatant racism had led to this moment. The baby moved again, as if sensing her tension. The massive courtroom doors loomed before her. Inside, she could hear the murmur of voices, the shuffle of papers. Sarah squeezed her arm. "Remember," her lawyer whispered, "you're not alone in there." Angela nodded, squaring her shoulders despite the increasing discomfort in her lower back. The doors opened, and she stepped forward into the hushed courtroom, where dozens of eyes turned to watch her enter. The baby kicked once more, and a sharper pain shot through her abdomen. But Angela kept walking, her head high, even as sweat beaded on her forehead. She had come too far to turn back now. The courtroom fell silent as Angela made her way down the center aisle. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing in the hushed space. To her right, she spotted Jenny from accounting, her former colleague, sitting rigid in a navy suit. Their eyes met briefly before Jenny looked away, her face flushing red. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Thompson entered. Angela struggled to her feet, one hand supporting her lower back. The pain was getting worse, but she forced herself to focus on the judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s who surveyed the courtroom with sharp eyes. "Be seated," Judge Thompson said, adjusting her glasses. "We're here today for Davis versus Boston Regional Corporation, case number 2025, CV 4876. Are all parties present?" Sarah stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Sarah Chun for the plaintiff, Angela Davis. A tall man in an expensive suit rose from the defense table. "James Wilson for Boston Regional Corporation, Your Honor. With me is Michael Stewart and our client, Robert Thompson." Angela's stomach clenched as Mr. Roberts nodded to the judge. He sat there, perfectly composed, as if he hadn't spent the last 3 years making her work life hell. "Ms. Chun, call your first witness," Judge Thompson ordered. "The plaintiff calls Maria Rodriguez." Angela watched as Maria, her former cubicle neighbor, walked to the witness stand. Maria's hands shook as she was sworn in, her voice barely audible as she repeated the oath. "Ms. Rodriguez," Sarah began, "how long have you worked at Boston Regional Corporation?" 5 years next month. "And during that time, have you witnessed any discriminatory behavior from management, specifically from Mr. Roberts?" Maria glanced at Mr. Roberts, then back at Sarah. "Yes, many times. Could you describe a specific incident?" Maria twisted her hands in her lap. "Last year, during performance reviews, Mr. Roberts told me my accent was too thick for client interaction. He moved me to back office work, even though my client satisfaction scores were among the highest in the department." The defense lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor." "Relevance?" "Your Honor," Sarah countered. "This establishes a pattern of discriminatory behavior by the defendant." "Overruled." "Continue, Ms. Rodriguez." Another cramp hit Angela, stronger than before. She shifted in her seat, trying to find a comfortable position. The baby was unusually active, turning and pushing against her ribs. Maria's testimony continued, describing incident after incident. Mr. Roberts maintained his poker face, but Angela noticed his jaw clenching tighter with each example. "And Ms. Davis?" Sarah asked. "Did you witness any specific incidents involving her?" "Yes," Maria said firmly. Mr. Roberts constantly made comments about her hair, calling it unprofessional and distracting. When she announced her pregnancy, he started excluding her from important meetings, saying she wouldn't be around long enough to matter. The defense lawyer stood again. "Objection. Speculation about my client's motivations." "Sustained," Judge Thompson said. The jury will disregard that last statement. Angela felt a trickle of sweat run down her back. The courtroom seemed to be getting warmer, and the pain in her abdomen was becoming harder to ignore. She caught Sarah watching her with concern. After Maria, 2 more colleagues testified, both describing similar experiences. Mr. Roberts' face grew darker with each testimony. His lawyers huddled around him, whispering urgently. During a brief recess, Sarah approached Angela. "You're up next. Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," Angela lied, shifting in her seat again. "Just nervous. Remember what we practiced. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and don't let them provoke you." The bailiff called the court back to order. Angela's heart pounded as Sarah stood. The plaintiff calls Angela Davis to the stand. The walk to the witness stand felt like miles. Each step sent waves of discomfort through her body. The baby kicked repeatedly, as if protesting the situation. As she passed the defense table, Mr. Roberts stared at her with cold eyes. "Watch your step, Ms. Davis," the bailiff said, helping her up to the witness stand. The oath was administered, and Angela's voice shook as she swore to tell the truth. She sat carefully, adjusting her dress over her belly. The pain was getting worse, coming in regular waves now. "Ms. Davis," Sarah began, "please tell the court about your employment history at Boston Regional Corporation." Angela took a deep breath. "I started as a junior analyst in 2022. Within my first year, I received 2 promotions based on my performance. Everything changed when Mr. Roberts became department head in 2023. How did it change? He began nitpicking everything I did. My reports were suddenly not up to standard. My presentation style was too aggressive. My hair was unprofessional." Angela's voice grew stronger as she spoke, despite the increasing discomfort. "When Jenny Thompson was promoted over me, despite having less experience and lower performance scores, Mr. Roberts said I didn't fit the image of senior management." The defense lawyer stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The plaintiff is making assumptions about hiring decisions." "I have documentation," Angela continued, her voice rising. "Emails where Mr. Roberts specifically mentioned my urban appearance as a concern. Performance reviews that were altered after I filed my complaint. Witnesses who heard him say he couldn't have a girl like me in leadership." "Ms. Davis," Judge Thompson warned, "please wait for questions before responding." Another wave of pain hit, stronger than before. Angela gripped the edge of the witness stand, trying to maintain her composure. The baby shifted dramatically, and she felt an uncomfortable pressure building. "Sorry, Your Honor," she managed to say. Sarah approached with a document. "I'd like to enter this into evidence as Exhibit C." "Ms. Davis, can you identify this email?" Angela tried to focus on the paper, but the words swam before her eyes. The pain was becoming unbearable, and she felt a strange sensation, as if something was about to... "Ms. Davis?" Sarah's voice seemed far away. Angela started, then felt a warm gush of liquid between her legs. Her eyes widened in panic as she realized what was happening. The courtroom went silent as water began pooling beneath her chair. "My water broke," Angela whispered, her voice barely audible in the stunned courtroom. Then louder, panic rising in her throat. "My water just broke." Judge Thompson leaned forward. "Bailiff, call 911 immediately." "Ms. Davis, stay where you are." The courtroom erupted into motion. Sarah rushed to Angela's side, while the jury members craned their necks to see what was happening. Mr. Roberts and his legal team whispered urgently among themselves. "It's too early," Angela gasped, gripping the witness stand. "I still have 3 weeks." A contraction cut off her words, stronger than any she'd felt before. She doubled over, drawing sharp breaths through clenched teeth. "Clear the courtroom," Judge Thompson ordered, rising from her seat. "Everyone except the immediate parties and medical personnel. Now!" People shuffled out, their whispers echoing off the high ceiling. Angela caught fragments of their conversations. "Right in the middle of testimony. Shouldn't have been here in her condition." The bailiff returned, phone in hand. "Ambulance is 8 minutes out, Your Honor." Another contraction hit. Angela moaned, her knuckles white against the wooden railing. Sarah grabbed her hand. "Breathe, Angela. Remember your birthing classes? In through your nose, Out through your mouth. The baby's not supposed to come yet, Angela said between breaths. Dr. Thompson said 3 more weeks. Babies don't always follow schedules, Judge Thompson said, approaching the witness stand. She'd removed her robe, revealing a simple black dress underneath. I've had 3 of my own, all early. Mr. Roberts, make yourself useful and get some towels from the restroom. Mr. Roberts stood frozen, his face pale. Should I? Now, Mr. Roberts, the judge barked. He hurried out, nearly colliding with a court officer bringing in bottles of water and a first aid kit. Angela tried to stand, but another contraction forced her back down. I can't have my baby here. Not in front of... She looked at the defense table, where the remaining lawyers sat uncomfortably. Defense counsel, Judge Thompson said sharply, you may step into the hallway if you wish. The lawyers gathered their papers and fled, leaving only Mr. Roberts' empty chair at their table. 5 minutes to EMS, the bailiff announced. Sarah wiped Angela's forehead with a tissue. You're doing great. Just hold on a little longer. I need to finish my testimony, Angela insisted, then gasped as another contraction ripped through her. The case, the only thing you need to focus on right now, is bringing this baby into the world safely, Judge Thompson said. She turned as Mr. Roberts returned with an armful of paper towels and hand towels from the restroom. Here, he said awkwardly, placing them on the judge's bench. A particularly strong contraction made Angela cry out. The pressure was building, and she felt an overwhelming urge to push. Something's happening, she panted. I need. Don't push, Sarah and Judge Thompson said simultaneously. The courtroom doors burst open as 2 paramedics rushed in with their equipment. They quickly assessed the situation. How far apart are the contractions? The first paramedic asked, pulling on gloves. About 2 minutes, Sarah answered, still holding Angela's hand. The second paramedic checked Angela's vitals. Blood pressure's elevated. Ma'am, how many weeks are you? 37. Angela managed between breaths. Due in 3 weeks. Has your pregnancy had any complications? No, everything's been. Another contraction cut her off. This one felt different, more intense. Oh God, I need to push. The first paramedic did a quick examination and looked up with concern. She's fully dilated. This baby's coming now. What about the hospital? Sarah asked. No time. We need to deliver here. Mr. Roberts, who had been standing awkwardly by his table, suddenly spoke up. Should I leave? Judge Thompson fixed him with a stern look. Mr. Roberts, you've made this woman's life difficult for 3 years. The least you can do is witness the consequences of your actions. Grab those towels and help me set up a clean area. The paramedics worked quickly, transforming the witness stand area into a makeshift delivery room. They laid out sterile pads and arranged their equipment while Angela fought the urge to push. Okay, Ms. Davis, the lead paramedic said. On the next contraction, I want you to push. Judge, if you could support her back. Legal counsel, keep holding her hand. Mr. Roberts, more towels at the ready. Angela looked up at the ornate ceiling of the courtroom, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She was supposed to be in a hospital with soft lights and medical equipment and privacy. Not here, in front of the man who'd made her work-life hell, in the middle of her discrimination testimony. A contraction built stronger than ever. The paramedic nodded. Push, Ms. Davis. Angela bore down, squeezing Sarah's hand so hard her lawyer winced. Judge Thompson supported her back, murmuring encouragement. Even Mr. Roberts stood ready with fresh towels, his face a mix of shock and something that looked almost like remorse. Good. Again on the next one. Suddenly, through the haze of pain and effort, Angela heard something unexpected, singing. The courthouse chapel choir was practicing upstairs, their voices drifting down through the old building's ventilation system. Amazing Grace, clear and sweet, filtered into the courtroom. Push, the paramedic commanded. Angela pushed, the choir's hymn surrounding her. Her consciousness narrowed to this moment. The pain, the pressure, the singing, the strange assembly of people around her. I can see the head, the paramedic announced. One more big push. Mr. Roberts had moved closer, still holding his stack of towels. His face had lost its usual coldness, replaced by something like awe. "You can do this, Ms. Davis," he said quietly. "You're the strongest person in this company." Angela barely registered his words as another contraction built. The choir's voices swelled above them, filling the courtroom with song as she gave one final, massive push. A new cry joined the choir, high, angry, and very much alive. "It's a girl," the paramedic announced, quickly wrapping the tiny, wriggling body in clean towels. "Born at 10:47 a.m. in the Superior Court of Boston." They placed the baby on Angela's chest. Through tears, she saw her daughter's face for the first time, perfect and angry and beautiful. The choir's last notes faded away as the baby's cries filled the courtroom. Judge Thompson wiped her eyes. "I think we can consider this morning's testimony complete." The paramedics worked swiftly around Angela and her newborn daughter, checking vital signs and cleaning them both as best they could in the makeshift delivery area. The baby's cries had softened to whimpers as she nestled against her mother's chest. "BP is still elevated," the first paramedic said, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around Angela's arm. "We need to get them both to the hospital for proper post-delivery care." "I'll call ahead to Mass General," the second paramedic added, reaching for his radio. "Let them know we're coming in with a courthouse delivery." Angela barely heard them. She couldn't take her eyes off her daughter's face. The tiny nose, the perfect bow of her lips, the dark curls already visible on her head. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered. "You just couldn't wait, could you?" Judge Thompson cleared her throat. "Mr. Roberts, I believe you and your legal team should step out while we get Ms. Davis and her baby ready for transport." Mr. Roberts hadn't moved from his spot, still clutching and used towels. His usual confident demeanor had completely crumbled. "Of course, Your Honor. But first—" He stepped forward, addressing Angela directly. "Ms. Davis, I need to say something." "Mr. Roberts," Sarah started, protective, but Angela raised a hand to stop her. "Let him speak." He shifted uncomfortably, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained with water from the towels. "What I've witnessed here today, your strength, your determination, I was wrong. About everything. The way I treated you, the things I said." He swallowed hard. "There will be no need to continue this trial. I'll be recommending to the board that we settle immediately, with all your demands met." The baby squirmed, letting out a small cry. Angela adjusted her hold, wincing at the movement. "Why now?" "Because I just watched you give birth in a courtroom rather than back down from fighting injustice. If that's not leadership material, I don't know what is." Before Angela could respond, the lead paramedic interrupted. "Sorry, but we really need to get them moving. The placenta still needs to be delivered, and we need proper medical facilities for that." A flurry of activity followed. Court officers cleared the hallways while the paramedics prepared Angela and the baby for transport. Sarah gathered Angela's belongings, making calls to notify her family. "Wait," Angela said as they started to move her. "Judge Thompson?" The judge stepped forward. "Yes, Ms. Davis? Thank you for everything." Most judges would have just declared a mistrial. Judge Thompson smiled. "In 30 years on the bench, this is definitely a first. But justice comes in many forms." She glanced at Mr. Roberts. "Sometimes it takes a dramatic event to open people's eyes." The paramedics had just finished securing Angela to the transport chair when another complication arose. "We've got some excessive bleeding here," the lead paramedic announced, his voice tense. "Change of plans. We need lights and sirens." The calm atmosphere immediately shifted back to emergency mode. Angela felt lightheaded, the faces around her blurring slightly. "Stay with us, Ms. Davis," the paramedic said firmly. "Keep talking to your baby." "What's her name?" Angela blinked, trying to focus. The baby was still on her chest, now wrapped securely in clean blankets. "Justice," she said softly. "Her name is Justice." They moved quickly through the courthouse hallways, now lined with curious onlookers. Angela caught glimpses of familiar faces, other employees from Boston Regional, courthouse staff, even some members of the choir who had unknowingly provided the soundtrack to her delivery. Outside, the morning sun was bright, and a crowd had gathered. Someone must have spread the word about what happened in Courtroom 3. As the paramedics carefully maneuvered Angela and baby Justice down the courthouse steps, applause broke out. "Make way," the paramedics called, heading for the waiting ambulance. Sarah jogged alongside them. "I'll follow in my car. Your mother's meeting us at the hospital." Another wave of dizziness hit Angela. The paramedics picked up their pace. BP dropping, one called out, "We need to move now." They loaded her into the ambulance, the baby still secured to her chest. The last thing Angela saw before the doors closed was Mr. Roberts standing on the courthouse steps, his face drawn with concern, his phone to his ear. Inside the ambulance, machines beeped and paramedics worked efficiently. And 4 was started, vital signs monitored. Baby Justice began to cry again, perhaps sensing the tension. "Shush, sweet girl," Angela murmured, though her own vision was starting to dim at the edges. "Everything's going to be okay. Ms. Davis, stay with us," a paramedic's voice cut through the fog. "Tell us about your baby. Why did you choose the name Justice?" Angela forced herself to focus on the question, on her daughter's warm weight against her chest. "Because that's what I was fighting for when she decided to arrive. Justice for myself, for other women like me." "Good, keep talking. We're almost at the hospital." The ambulance sirens wailed above them as they sped through Boston streets. Angela could hear the paramedics speaking rapidly into their radios, using medical terms she didn't understand. Her body felt cold despite the warm blankets they'd placed over her. "Blood pressure still dropping," someone said. "Push another unit of fluids." Justice squirmed, her tiny hand escaping the blanket. Angela touched it with one finger, marveling at how small it was. "Your timing might not have been perfect, baby girl, but your entrance sure made an impact." Through the ambulance windows, she saw the hospital approaching. More medical personnel waited at the emergency entrance, ready to take over. "Courthouse delivery, significant postpartum hemorrhage," the paramedic reported as they rushed through the doors. "Mother's BP is unstable. Baby appears healthy, but needs full assessment." The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor streaked past above them. Angela heard her mother's voice somewhere nearby, calling her name. Justice was still crying. "We need to take the baby now," a nurse said gently, reaching for Justice. "No," Angela protested weakly, but she could feel herself fading. "It's just for a few minutes, while we get you stabilized. She'll be right here in the same room." As they lifted Justice away, Angela caught one last glimpse of her daughter's face. Then the lights above her blurred into a bright haze, and she felt herself drifting. "Stay with us, Ms. Davis," someone called. "Think about your daughter. Think about Justice." The emergency room burst into organized chaos as doctors and nurses swarmed around Angela. Monitors beeped urgently, and voices called out medical terms that blended together in her semi-conscious state. "Type and cross for 4 units. BP's 80-40 and dropping. Starting second 4 line." Angela's mother, Patricia, pressed against the wall of the trauma bay, her hands clasped in prayer. "Please, baby girl, stay with us." Dr. Rachel Martinez, the attending physician, barked orders while examining Angela. "Where's that blood? We needed it yesterday." "Coming now," a nurse called, rushing in with bags of dark red fluid. "Mama," Angela's voice was barely a whisper. "Where's Justice?" Patricia moved closer, taking her daughter's hand. "She's right next door, baby. The pediatric team is checking her out. She's perfect." "O-negative hanging," another nurse announced. Dr. Martinez nodded. "Push it wide open." "Ms. Davis? Angela? Can you hear me?" Angela tried to focus on the doctor's face. "Yes, you're having some significant bleeding after delivery. We're giving you blood and medication to stop it. I need you to stay with us." "Okay." A sharp pain shot through Angela's abdomen. She squeezed her mother's hand, tears leaking from her eyes. "Pain medication going in now," a nurse said. Sarah Chin appeared at the doorway, still in her court clothes. "I've got the company's lawyers on the phone. They're asking about Angela's condition." "Not now," Patricia snapped, but Angela shook her head. What are they saying?" Sarah stepped closer, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. "They want to settle. Full compensation, back pay, promotion, and they're offering to cover all medical expenses, including today's." "Mr. Roberts?" Angela managed to ask. "He's still at the courthouse, giving a statement to the press. The story's already going viral." The monitors suddenly blared with new urgency. Angela felt cold, so cold, despite the warm blankets covering her. BP's crashing again. A nurse called out. Dr. Martinez moved quickly. We need to get her to the ER now. She's still hemorrhaging. No, Angela protested weakly. My baby. Your baby is doing great, Dr. Martinez assured her. But she needs her mama healthy. We're going to take good care of you both. As they prepared to move her, a pediatric nurse appeared with Justice, now cleaned up and wearing a tiny hospital hat. Baby's vitals are all perfect. Apgar scores 8 and 9. Would Mama like to see her before we go to surgery? They brought Justice close enough for Angela to see her face. The baby's eyes were open now, dark and alert, staring straight at her mother. Fight, baby girl, Angela whispered. Just like your mama. Then they were moving, rushing through hospital corridors. Patricia and Sarah's voices faded behind them. The operating room lights blazed overhead, harsh and bright. Count backward from 10, the anesthesiologist said, placing a mask over her face. Angela thought of Justice's tiny hand, of the courtroom choir singing, of Mr. Roberts' face as he watched her daughter enter the world. 10, 9, 8. The world faded to black. Hours later, Angela slowly emerged from the fog of anesthesia. The first thing she heard was her mother's voice, singing softly, the same in the choir had been practicing during Justice's birth. Mama! Her throat felt dry. Patricia jumped up. Oh, thank God. Doctor! She's awake. Dr. Martinez appeared, checking monitors and Angela's vital signs. Welcome back, Ms. Davis. You gave us quite a scare, but you're stable now. We managed to stop the bleeding. Justice, your daughter is absolutely perfect. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, excellent vital signs. Would you like to see her? Angela nodded weakly. A nurse brought Justice over, now dressed in a proper hospital gown, her dark curls peeking out from under a pink cap. She's been waiting to eat, the nurse said, helping Angela position the baby. She's got quite an appetite. As Justice latched on for her first feeding, Sarah entered the room, carrying her laptop. You're not going to believe what's happening. Sarah, Patricia warned. She just woke up. No, Angela said, stroking Justice's cheek. Tell me. Sarah opened her laptop. Your story has exploded. Every major news outlet is covering it. Justice born in courtroom during discrimination case. The company's stock dropped 15 points after Mr. Roberts' press conference. What did he say? He admitted everything. The discrimination, the altered reviews, all of it. But that's not all. Sarah pulled up another page. Women from other companies are coming forward with similar stories. You've started a movement, Angela. Justice pulled away from feeding, making small, satisfied noises. Angela adjusted her hospital gown, trying to process everything. The settlement papers are ready whenever you feel up to it, Sarah continued. They've met every demand we made, plus some we didn't even ask for. They're establishing a diversity and inclusion board, with you as a consulting member if you want it. A knock at the door interrupted them. A delivery person stood there with an enormous bouquet of flowers. The card read, from the courthouse choir, Amazing grace indeed. More visitors arrived throughout the afternoon. Nurses, doctors, even Judge Thompson herself, still in her court clothes. I suspended court for the rest of the day, the judge said, admiring Justice. Somehow routine traffic violations seemed less important after this morning's events. Thank you, Angela said. For everything, Judge Thompson smiled. You know, in 30 years on the bench, I've seen every kind of case imaginable. But today I saw real justice in action. This little one made quite an entrance. Justice slept peacefully in Angela's arms, unaware of her already growing fame. Patricia adjusted the baby's blanket, wiping tears from her eyes. Your father would be so proud, she whispered. Standing up for yourself like that, bringing this beautiful child into the world right there in that courtroom. A soft knock interrupted them. To everyone's surprise, Mr. Roberts stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. May I come in? Angela hesitated, then nodded. He entered slowly, carrying a small gift bag. I know nothing I say can make up for my actions, he began. But I want you to know that today changed me. Changed how I see everything. He placed the gift bag on the bedside table. It's a corporate credit card. For anything you or Justice need. No limits, no questions asked. Sarah picked up the bag, examining its contents. This is highly irregular. So is giving birth during your discrimination testimony, Mr. Roberts said. The board approved it unanimously, along with your new position, Head of Corporate Culture and Diversity Initiatives. If you want it. Justice stirred in Angela's arms, letting out a small cry. Mr. Roberts stepped back. Think about it, he said. Take all the time you need. Your job will be waiting. He paused at the door. And Ms. Davis? Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. After he left, Angela looked down at her daughter, now awake and staring up at her with dark, curious eyes. Well, Justice, she said softly, you certainly know how to make an entrance. And maybe, just maybe, you helped change a few minds along the way. The next morning, Angela woke to the sound of news helicopters hovering outside her hospital window. Justice slept peacefully in the bassinet beside her bed, untroubled by the growing commotion. They've been there since dawn, a nurse said, entering to check Angela's vitals. Security's keeping the press in the lobby, but they're persistent. Angela reached for the TV remote, turning on the local news. Her own face filled the screen, a photo from her company ID badge, alongside headlines scrolling across the bottom. Courthouse birth sparks national conversation on workplace discrimination. The door opened, and Sarah rushed in, already dressed for court. Good, you're awake. Have you seen the news? Just turning it on now. Sarah grabbed the remote, changing to a national network where a panel of experts was discussing the case. What we witnessed yesterday in that Boston courtroom was more than just a dramatic birth, a civil rights attorney was saying. It was a powerful symbol of the struggles women, especially women of color, face in corporate America. Another panelist nodded. The fact that Ms. Davis was literally in labor while fighting for her rights. You couldn't script a more powerful metaphor. Turn it off, Angela said, feeling overwhelmed. Justice stirred, making small sounds that Angela already recognized as hunger cues. She lifted her daughter, wincing slightly at her still tender stitches. Sarah sat down, pulling out her tablet. The settlement offer has been formally submitted. They've added even more provisions overnight. She began reading. Full reinstatement at executive level, 5 years back pay, comprehensive medical coverage for you and Justice, a seat on the board's diversity committee. A knock interrupted her. Dr. Martinez entered, followed by Patricia carrying coffee and breakfast. How are we feeling this morning? The doctor asked, checking Angela's surgical site. Sore, but okay. When can we go home? Let's see how you do today. If your blood work looks good and you're feeling strong enough, maybe tomorrow. Dr. Martinez smiled at Justice, who was now nursing contentedly. Baby girl's doing great, though. All her tests came back perfect. Patricia set the coffee down, taking out her phone. Baby, you need to see these messages. They're coming in from everywhere. Women sharing their own stories, thanking you for speaking up. There's more, Sarah added. Other companies are already announcing reviews of their diversity policies. The governor's office called. They want to establish a task force on workplace discrimination. With you as an honorary chair. Angela looked down at Justice, who had fallen asleep at her breast. All this because you couldn't wait 3 more weeks, huh? Another knock at the door. This time it was Judge Thompson, carrying a thick envelope. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, entering. I brought something for you to see. She pulled out a document. This is from our court reporter, the official transcript of yesterday's proceedings, right up until the moment your water broke. I thought you might want it for Justice's baby book. Angela took the transcript with her free hand, scanning the pages. There it was in stark black and white. Her testimony, the mounting tension, the moment everything changed. There's something else, Judge Thompson continued. I've been a judge for 3 decades, seen thousands of cases. But yesterday, I witnessed real justice in action. It made me think about all the other women who never got their day in court, who stayed silent because the fight seemed too hard. She pulled out another document. I'm establishing a legal clinic at the courthouse. Free representation for discrimination cases. If you're interested, we could use someone with your expertise on the advisory board. Before Angela could respond, Justice started fussing. As she adjusted her daughter, her hospital gown slipped, revealing the edge of her surgical scar. Look at you, Patricia said softly. Still recovering from major surgery, And they're already wanting you to change the world. She already has, Sarah interjected. Check this out. She held up her phone, showing a social media feed. The hashtag Justice for All was trending, filled with photos of women at their workplaces, many with natural hair, sharing their own stories of discrimination. A new nurse entered, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, but there's a call from the White House Office of Women's Issues. They're asking to speak with Ms. Davis. Angela laughed, then winced at the pull on her stitches. The White House? Because I had a baby in court? Because you showed extraordinary courage, Judge Thompson corrected. You could have backed down, could have waited for another court date. Instead, you literally brought new life into the world while fighting for justice. That's powerful symbolism. Justice began to cry in earnest now, her tiny face scrunching up. Angela recognized this cry. Her daughter needed a diaper change. Powerful symbolism needs a fresh diaper, she said, attempting to sit up. Patricia offered, taking justice. You rest. As Patricia changed the baby, more hospital staff appeared at the door. Nurses, orderlies, even cafeteria workers. They've been following the story, they said. They wanted to thank her, to share their own experiences. Ms. Davis, a young black nurse, stepped forward. I just wanted you to know, I wore my natural hair to work today. First time ever. My supervisor didn't say a word. Angela felt tears welling up. Come here, she said. Opening her arms, the nurse hugged her carefully, mindful of her stitches. Sarah's phone buzzed again. The company's stock has dropped another 10 points. The board is calling an emergency meeting to discuss comprehensive policy changes. And Mr. Roberts? Angela asked. Resigned this morning, but not before implementing all the changes we demanded. His resignation letter, Sarah read from her phone. Yesterday, I witnessed true courage and leadership. It made me realize I'm not the right person to lead this company into a more equitable future. Justice, now clean and content, was passed back to Angela. The baby's eyes were open, taking in the room full of people with that intense newborn gaze. You know, Judge Thompson said, watching them, in law school, they teach us that justice is blind. But sometimes it needs to see clearly. Sometimes it needs to look like a baby girl born in courtroom 3, forcing everyone to confront their prejudices. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Through the door's window, they could see hospital security dealing with persistent reporters. They're not going away, Sarah observed. People want to hear your story. Angela looked down at Justice, then around the room at all these women. Her mother, her lawyer, the judge, the nurses, each fighting their own battles, each finding strength in this unexpected moment. Then let's tell it, she said. Not just my story. All of our stories. She kissed Justice's forehead. What do you think about that, baby girl? Ready to help Mama change the world? Justice's only response was a tiny yawn, but to everyone in that hospital room, it felt like the most powerful answer imaginable. 3 days after Justice's dramatic arrival, Angela sat in her hospital room, watching Dr. Martinez examine her daughter. The news helicopters had finally stopped hovering outside, but reporters still camped in the parking lot. She's gaining weight beautifully, Dr. Martinez said, making notes in Justice's chart. And your labs are looking much better. I think you're both ready to go home today. Angela touched her surgical scar gently. Are you sure? After the hemorrhage? You're healing well, but you'll need help for the first few weeks. Is your mother staying with you? Yes, Angela nodded. She's at my apartment now, setting everything up. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah entered, carrying a thick manila envelope and looking more serious than usual. The final settlement papers just came through, she said, setting her briefcase down. And there's something else we need to discuss. Dr. Martinez finished Justice's exam. I'll get your discharge papers started. The nurses will go over home care instructions with you soon. After the doctor left, Sarah spread the documents across Angela's bedside table. They've added even more provisions. Full health coverage for life, for both you and Justice. A trust fund for her education. And she pulled out another paper. The board wants to rename the corporate scholarship program after you. Angela adjusted Justice in her arms, still marveling at how such a tiny person could create such massive changes. It feels surreal. There's more. Sarah hesitated. The major networks are in a bidding war for your story. They want to make a movie, maybe a documentary series. The offers are substantial. How substantial? Sarah showed her a number that made Angela's eyes widen. And that's just a starting point. They also want you on the talk show circuit. Every major program wants an exclusive. Justice began to fuss, and Angela automatically started rocking her. I don't know, Sarah. All I did was go into labor at an inconvenient time. No, Sarah said firmly. You stood up against discrimination while literally bringing new life into the world. Do you know how powerful that image is? The video from the courthouse security cameras has been viewed millions of times. Another knock. This time it was a nurse with discharge instructions and a stack of prescriptions. As she went over wound care and warning signs to watch for, Angela's phone buzzed with incoming messages. Your mother says the apartment is ready, Sarah reported, checking the messages. But she frowned. There are still reporters camped outside your building. Ms. Davis? The nurse looked uncertain. There's also quite a crowd in the hospital lobby. They've been bringing gifts for the baby. Angela sighed. I just want to take my daughter home. Sarah's face lit up. Actually, I have an idea about that. She made a quick phone call. Judge Thompson? We need a favor. An hour later, Angela sat in a wheelchair, hospital policy for discharge, with Justice secured in her car seat. Instead of going through the main lobby, they were headed toward a service entrance where Judge Thompson waited with her official courthouse vehicle, complete with tinted windows and judicial plates. Your chariot awaits, the judge said with a smile. Let's get you two home. As they helped Angela into the car, mindful of her stitches, a small group of hospital staff gathered to say goodbye. The young nurse who had worn her natural hair touched Angela's arm. Thank you, she whispered. You changed things here. Management sent out new guidelines yesterday. No more discrimination based on natural hair or cultural hairstyles. In the car, Justice slept peacefully in her car seat while Judge Thompson navigated through Boston streets, taking a circuitous route to avoid any trailing reporters. The courthouse has been chaos, the judge reported. Every discrimination case on the docket suddenly wants their day in court. And the legal clinic idea? We've already received funding offers from 3 major law firms. They pulled up to Angela's apartment building through the back entrance. Patricia was waiting with the service elevator key, courtesy of the building manager who had seen Angela's story on the news. Welcome home, baby girls, Patricia said, helping Angela out of the car while Sarah carried Justice's car seat. The apartment had been transformed. Patricia had cleaned everything, set up the nursery, and stocked the fridge. There were flowers everywhere, sent by well-wishers, women's rights organizations, and corporate HR departments across the country. The building hired extra security, Patricia reported, helping Angela settle on the couch. No reporters allowed past the lobby. Sarah set Justice's car seat down gently. The baby's still sleeping. I've cleared your schedule for the next month. The only decision you need to make is about the interviews and movie rights. Angela watched her daughter sleep, thinking about everything that had happened in the past few days. You know what's strange? When I filed that lawsuit, I thought I was just fighting for myself, for my right to be treated fairly at work. And now, Judge Thompson asked, now I look at Justice, and I realize I was fighting for her future too, for the world she'll grow up in. Angela touched her daughter's tiny hand. Maybe that's why she decided to make such a dramatic entrance. To make sure everyone was paying attention, Patricia began unpacking Angela's hospital bag. Your father used to say that change doesn't come from comfortable places. Sometimes it takes something dramatic to open people's eyes. Speaking of dramatic, Sarah interjected. The courthouse choir sent something. She pulled out a CD. They recorded Amazing Grace, the same version they were singing when Justice was born. They want permission to sell it as a fundraiser for the legal clinic. Angela laughed, then winced at her stitches. My daughter's birth has a soundtrack? She is more than that, Judge Thompson said. She has a legacy. Years from now, when people talk about workplace discrimination cases, they'll talk about the day Justice was literally born in a courtroom. Justice began to stir, making the small sounds that preceded hunger. As Angela prepared to feed her, she looked around at these women who had become her support system. Her mother, her lawyer, the judge who had helped deliver her daughter. "So what do you think, baby girl?" she whispered to Justice. "Should we tell our story? Help other women find their voice?" Justice's only answer was to latch on hungrily, but to Angela, it felt like affirmation. "Okay," she told Sarah. "Set up the interviews. But on our terms, no exploitation, no sensationalism. Just the truth about what happened in that courtroom and why it matters." "In the movie?" Sarah asked. Angela smiled down at her nursing daughter. "As long as they get one thing right, Justice needs to be the star." 2 weeks after Justice's birth, Angela sat in her living room, watching her daughter sleep while a makeup artist touched up her face. The apartment had been transformed into an impromptu television studio, with lights, cameras, and cables snaking across the floor. 5 minutes until we're live, the producer called out softly, mindful of the sleeping baby. Sarah stood behind the cameras, reviewing talking points on her tablet. "Remember, you control the narrative. If you're uncomfortable with any questions, just say so." Angela nodded, adjusting her blouse. She'd chosen to wear her hair natural, despite the makeup artist's gentle suggestion about smoothing it out for television. "This is how I look," she'd said firmly. This is what the whole fight was about. The national morning show host, Lisa Chun, sat down in the chair opposite Angela. "Thank you for choosing us for your first interview," she said warmly. "My own mother faced similar discrimination in the 80s. Your story, it really hit home." Before Angela could respond, Justice stirred in her bassinet. The baby's tiny face scrunched up, and Angela recognized the signs of an imminent cry. "Can we pause?" she asked, already reaching for her daughter. "Actually," Lisa said, "why don't we keep her in the shot? It's part of the story, after all." Angela lifted Justice, who immediately calmed in her arms. The producer counted down, and suddenly they were live to millions of viewers across America. "Good morning, I'm Lisa Chun, and we're here with Angela Davis and her 2-week-old daughter, Justice, whose birth in a Boston courtroom has sparked a national conversation about workplace discrimination." The interview flowed naturally. Angela described the events leading up to that day, the years of discrimination, the altered performance reviews, the comments about her hair. "Did you know you were in labor during your testimony?" Lisa asked. "I felt different that morning, but I thought it was just nerves." Justice had other plans. Angela smiled down at her daughter, now awake and staring at the bright lights. Looking back, maybe she knew exactly what she was doing. The video from the courtroom has been viewed over 10 million times. People are calling it a watershed moment for workplace discrimination cases. Did you ever imagine your personal fight would have such an impact? Angela shifted Justice to her shoulder. "When I filed the lawsuit, I just wanted to be treated fairly. But after Justice was born, when I started hearing from other women," she paused, emotional. "There was this young lawyer who wrote to me. She said she'd been straightening her hair for years, afraid to wear it natural. The day after our story broke, she wore her curls to court for the first time." Lisa leaned forward. "The response has been overwhelming. Companies across the country are reviewing their policies. Your former employer has completely revised their diversity guidelines. How does that feel?" "It feels like maybe my daughter will grow up in a slightly better world." Angela kissed Justice's head. "That's worth everything we went through." After the interview, as the crew packed up their equipment, Sarah showed Angela her phone. "You're trending again. Look at these responses." The hashtag Justice for All was filled with new posts. Women at work, many wearing their natural hair, sharing their own stories of standing up against discrimination. "Ms. Davis?" A young black woman from the camera crew approached hesitantly. Would it be okay if I took a picture with you and Justice? My mom called crying when she saw your story. She lost her job in the 90s for refusing to straighten her hair." Angela posed for the photo, Justice still cradled in her arms as the crew member showed her mother's emotional response text. Sarah's phone rang. "That was the governor's office," she reported after hanging up. "They want to move forward with the task force. They're calling it the Justice Initiative." Patricia emerged from the kitchen with lunch. "Baby, you need to eat. You're still recovering." As if on cue, Justice began rooting for food. Angela settled in her nursing chair, while Patricia dealt with the remaining crew members. "The movie people called again," Sarah said, sitting down with her laptop. "They've brought on a black female director. She wants to meet with you next week." Angela stroked Justice's cheek as she nursed. What do you think about that, baby girl? Ready to see your story on the big screen? A knock at the door revealed a delivery person with another huge flower arrangement. The card read, "From the women of Boston Regional Corporation. Thank you for changing everything." "Oh, and this came from the courthouse," Sarah added, pulling out an envelope. Inside was a formal-looking document. "What is it?" Angela asked. "They're naming the new legal clinic after you, the Angela Davis Center for Workplace Justice. Judge Thompson wants to know if you'll speak at the opening next month." Justice unlatched, milk-drunk and content. As Angela burped her, she thought about everything that had happened since that morning in the courtroom. "You know what's amazing?" she said softly. "All those years of fighting, of trying to prove myself. And in the end, it was this tiny person who made the biggest impact." Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. "Your father always said one person could change the world. He just didn't know it would be his granddaughter before she was even an hour old." Sarah's phone buzzed again. The interview is already viral. And look at this. 3 major corporations just announced new diversity and inclusion policies. They're specifically mentioning natural hair protection. Justice fell asleep on Angela's shoulder, completely unaware of her growing impact on corporate America. The afternoon sun caught her dark curls, creating a tiny halo effect. "Ms. Davis?" The producer poked her head back in. "I know you're done, but my network wants to do a whole series following women fighting workplace discrimination across the country. Would you consider being the executive producer?" Angela looked at Sarah, who was already pulling up her calendar. "Let me guess, you think I should do it?" "I think," Sarah said carefully, "that sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be, even if it's giving birth in a courtroom." Later that evening, after everyone had left, Angela sat in the nursery rocker. Justice sleeping peacefully in her arms. The city lights twinkled outside her window, and somewhere in those streets, she knew other women were finding their courage, standing up for their rights. "You know what's funny, Justice?" she whispered to her sleeping daughter. "Everyone keeps talking about how I changed things. But really, it was you. You decided that enough was enough. You chose that moment to make your entrance. And in doing so, you made everyone stop and really see what was happening." Justice's only response was to snuffle in her sleep, her tiny hand gripping Angela's finger. 1 month after Justice's birth, Angela stood before the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting her new suit. Today marked her first return to the courthouse since giving birth, this time for the opening of the legal clinic named in her honor. "You look perfect," Patricia said. Entering with Justice in her arms, the baby wore a tiny dress that matched her mother's suit, a gift from the courthouse staff. "Is my hair okay?" Angela touched her natural curls, styled in a professional but unapologetically natural way. "It's exactly how it should be." Sarah appeared in the doorway, checking her watch. "The press is already gathering. Judge Thompson says the courthouse steps are packed." Angela took Justice from her mother, breathing in her baby's sweet scent. "Ready for your first official public appearance, baby girl?" Judge Thompson had arranged for them to enter through a private entrance, avoiding the media circus out front. As they walked the familiar courthouse corridors, staff members stopped to greet them, many taking pictures with their phones. "Ms. Davis," a familiar voice called out. It was Jenny from accounting, hurrying toward them. "I'm so glad I caught you." Angela tensed slightly, remembering their last interaction before the birth. But Jenny's face was open, emotional. "I wanted to thank you," Jenny said. "After what happened, I told HR everything. About how Mr. Roberts made promotion decisions, about the comments, all of it. I should have spoken up sooner." "Better late than never," Angela replied. Adjusting Justice in her arms, they reached the courthouse's main hall, where a podium had been set up beneath a covered sign, the future name of the legal clinic. Through the windows, Angela could see the crowd outside growing larger. 2 minutes, Sarah announced, checking her phone. "The governor just arrived?" Justice began to fuss, and Angela recognized the hunger signs. "Now? Really? Give her to me," Patricia said. "I'll feed her the bottle we brought and bring her out for the photos after." As Angela handed over her daughter, she felt a moment of déjà vu. Standing in this same hall a month ago, her life about to change completely. "Ready?" Judge Thompson appeared, wearing her full judicial robes. "Quite a crowd out there. Word is some women drove from as far as Chicago to be here." The main doors opened, and Angela heard the roar of the crowd. She stepped out onto the courthouse steps, and the noise grew even louder. Signs waved in the crowd. Justice for all. Black hair is professional hair. Thanks for standing up. The governor spoke first, announcing new state legislation protecting against hair discrimination in the workplace. Then Judge Thompson introduced the legal clinic's mission and staff. Finally, it was Angela's turn at the podium. As she stepped up, the crowd fell silent. 1 month ago, I walked up these steps planning to testify about workplace discrimination. I was 8.5 months pregnant, scared, but determined to be heard. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. I didn't make it through my testimony. Instead, my daughter chose that moment to enter the world. Right here in courtroom 3, a cheer went up from the crowd. Angela saw women crying, hugging each other. People keep calling it a miracle, a symbol, a watershed moment. But for me, it was simply a mother and daughter refusing to be silenced. She touched her hair consciously. This is who I am. These curls that Mr. Roberts called unprofessional, they're the same curls my daughter was born with. And thanks to what happened in that courtroom, she'll grow up in a world where she never has to apologize for them. Patricia appeared at the side of the podium with Justice, who had finished her bottle. Angela took her daughter, holding her up for the crowd to see. The cheers were deafening. This clinic, Angela continued, will ensure that no one has to fight these battles alone. And while my daughter may have been born in a courtroom, I hope she grows up in a world where such fights are no longer necessary. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Angela sat in courtroom 3. Justice, sleeping in her arms, the room had been cleaned and restored after her birth, but Angela could still picture everything. Where the paramedics had stood, where the choir's voices had drifted down from above. It looks different when you're not in labor, Judge Thompson said, entering quietly. Smaller, Angela agreed. The first cases start next week. We already have a waiting list. The judge sat down beside them. In all my years on the bench, I've made thousands of rulings. But sometimes justice happens in unexpected ways. Sarah appeared with more news. The governor signed the bill. The Justice in the Workplace Act is now law. And 3 more states are introducing similar legislation. Justice stirred, opening her eyes. She had her mother's eyes, dark and intense, taking in everything around her. Your father's favorite quote was, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice," Patricia said, touching her granddaughter's cheek. He didn't know how right he was. A group of young law students peeked into the courtroom, phones ready for pictures. They'd been part of the crowd outside, wearing T-shirts with Angela and Justice's photo on them. "Come in," Angela called out. The students entered hesitantly, awed by the famous courtroom 3. "Can we get a picture?" one asked. "We're starting a law clinic at our school. We're calling it the Justice Project." As they posed for photos, more people drifted in. Courthouse staff, lawyers, women who'd been in the crowd. Soon the courtroom was full, just as it had been a month ago. Someone started humming Amazing Grace. Others joined in, and soon the hymn filled the courtroom, just as it had during Justice's birth. Angela looked down at her daughter, now fully awake and staring at the singing crowd. "What do you think, baby girl? Ready to help Mama change a few more things?" Justice's response was a tiny smile, her first, as the singing swelled around them. Later that night, back home in their apartment, Angela rocked Justice to sleep while watching the news coverage of the day. Her phone kept buzzing with messages. More women sharing stories. More companies announcing policy changes. More law schools starting discrimination clinics. "You know what's funny?" she whispered to her sleeping daughter. "When I filed that lawsuit, I thought I was fighting for my rights. But really, I was fighting for yours. And somehow, you knew exactly when to show up to make sure everyone got the message." She placed Justice in her crib, touching the mobile of courthouse buildings that the staff had given them, complete with a tiny courthouse 3. "Sleep well, my little justice warrior," she whispered. "You've already changed more than you'll ever know." As Angela left the nursery, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her natural curls framed her face, professional and beautiful and completely, unapologetically her. Thanks to her daughter's dramatic arrival, thousands of other women were now wearing their hair the same way, proud and unafraid. Sometimes, she realized, justice comes in unexpected packages. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a baby girl, born in a courtroom, reminding everyone that change is possible, necessary, and unstoppable.